Ariola.
Aye.
Aviles.
Aye.
Ayala.
Aye.
Banks.
Aye.
Botcher.
Aye.
Brannan.
Aye.
Brewer.
Yes.
Brooks. Powers.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
So while I'm voting aye, I did want to take a moment to speak on the home rule that pertains to the red light cameras. And I'm appreciative of being able to work with my colleague, Councilmember Ressler, on reauthorizing this important program. There's still much more work to do in terms of our oversight capabilities with the Department of Transportation. I'm looking forward to working with our partners in the state legislature to ensure that commitments that have been made are seen through, to ensure that we're not merely just setting cameras up, but that we are improving communities and the true safety of our streets in New York City. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ariola.
Thank you for the consideration to amend my vote. I am aye on all except for SLR 8 and 13. For those, I am a no.
Thank you. Caban.
Aye.
Carr.
I'm a no on preconsidered SLRs 8 and 13, and aye on the rest.
De La Rosa.
Aye.
Dinowitz.
Aye and no.
Feliz.
Aye.
Gennaro.
Aye.
Gutierrez.
Aye.
Hanif.
Aye.
Hanks.
Aye.
Holden.
Aye.
Hudson.
Aye.
Joseph.
Aye.
Krishnan.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lewis.
I vote aye on all except for preconsidered SLR 8.
Thank you. Mamarato.
I am an aye on all except for SLR 8 and 13. I am a no.
Marte.
Aye.
Mealy.
Pass.
Menon.
Aye.
Moya.
Vote aye.
Thank you. Narcisse.
Aye.
Nurse.
I vote aye.
Osei.
Aye.
Palladino.
I am an aye except for SLR 8 and 13, which I am a no.
Powers.
I vote aye.
Wrestler.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
We're passing a number of great home rule messages today, but I especially just want to call out SLR 8 and SLR 13. SLR 8, the expansion of the red light camera, making New York City, ensuring that New York City will have the largest red light camera program in the nation, will quite simply save lives. We lost 29 people last year due to cars running red lights. But we've been capped at only being able to have red light cameras at just 1% of intersections. We will now quadruple the red light camera program in New York City. It will make, this is an evidence-based, effective approach to reducing crashes on our street that cause death and serious injury. And SLR 13 is a innovative and effective new approach from the Department of Sanitation that will place cameras on street sweepers, automating enforcement, and actually holding bad actors accountable who are not moving their cars during alternate side parking, modeled after the MTA program of putting cameras on buses to keep cars out of bus lanes. We're going to actually make our streets safer, make our streets cleaner, get more garbage off our streets, have less rats in our communities without having to, and putting less pressure on the enforcement workers so they can spend their time doing other things. These are really terrific bills, and I hope that Albany takes swift and quick action. I just want to thank all the staff that worked on it, especially our Intergovernmental Affairs Division. Thank you. Aye on all.
Thank you. Riley.
Aye on all with the exception of SLR 8.
Thank you. Rivera.
I vote aye.
Salam.
Aye on all.
Salamanca.
Aye on all.
Sanchez.
Aye.
Thank you. Schulman.
Aye on all.
Stevens.
Aye on all except SLR 8 and SRL 13.
Thank you. Ong.
Aye on all.
Vernikov.
Aye on all with the exception of SLR 8 and 13.
Williams.
Aye on all except for SLR 13.
Juan.
Aye on all. Sorry, I'm
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Yeager.
No on SLR 8 for the reasons stated by the Majority Whip. No on SLR 13, and aye on the remainder. Thank you.
Zhuang.
Aye on all.
Mealy.
Aye on all and no on SLR 8, SLR 13.
Borelli.
Aye on all with the notable exceptions of SLR 8 and 13, to which I vote no and hope the car that's bringing up these home rules gets stuck in traffic cameras and doesn't make it on time.
Farias.
I vote aye on all, and I hope there's no traffic on the roadways to get these SLRs up.
Speaker Adams.
Aye on all. All items have been adopted by a vote of 51 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and 0 abstentions, with the exception of SLR 8, which was adopted by a vote of 40 in the affirmative, 11 in the negative, and 0 abstentions, and SLR 13, which was adopted by a vote of 41 in the affirmative, 10 in the negative, and 0 abstentions. We will now have the adoption of minutes by Councilmember Julie Wan.
I adopt the minutes.
Just want to reiterate, Councilmember Wan and I make a motion that the minutes of the stated meeting of May 16th be adopted as printed. Messages and papers from the mayor.
None.
Communication from city, county, and borough offices.
None.
Petitions and communications.
None.
Land use call-ups.
None.
Thank you. We will now have communication from Speaker Adrian Adams.
Thank you very much, Madam Majority Leader, and good afternoon, everyone. Starting on the evening of June 11th, our Jewish communities will be celebrating Shavuot. As you gather with your family and friends, I wish all New Yorkers who are celebrating a happy and safe Shavuot. June 12th is Loving Day, which marks the anniversary of the Supreme Court decision Loving versus Virginia, which ended anti-miscegenation laws and allows interracial marriage in the United States. June 12th is Philippines Independence Day, marking the country's independence from Spanish rule. And June 14th is Flag Day, when we celebrate the adoption of our national flag back in 1777. On Monday evening, we celebrated LGBTQIA+ Pride Month right here in council chambers. Thank you to everyone who made the celebration such a wonderful event, and congratulations to our honorees. Join us this coming Tuesday, June 11th for our Juneteenth celebration and on Wednesday, June 12th to celebrate Caribbean Heritage Month. Today is Foster Youth Shadow Day. Yay! The goal of Shadow Day is to give our foster youth the opportunity to learn about the City Council, become more civically engaged, and become introduced to new career pathways. We welcome all of our students to the People's House, and I'm sure that the folks who you are shadowing will personally shout you out today. Finally, please join me in wishing a happy belated birthday to Council Member Shekhar Krishnan. He had a birthday yesterday with a lot of cake. And an early birthday to Council Members Pirina Sanchez and Joanne Ariola, celebrating birthdays next week. And I also want to wish a happy belated birthday to our beloved Deputy Communications Director, Shirley Lamonji. Now we'll move on to our stated agenda. First, we'll vote on the following land use items. City of Yes, Zoning for Economic Opportunity, or ZEO. The Council has modified the New York City Department of City Planning's DCP proposed citywide zoning text amendment to update the city's outdated commercial zoning regulations. The Council made modifications to 14 of its 18 proposals to address concerns raised about them during the public review process by including limitations and safeguards that help strike the right balance between expanding opportunities for local businesses, creating jobs, and protecting neighborhoods and quality of life for all New Yorkers. This text amendment also includes the Council's priority of preserving manufacturing districts and enhancing the development of the industrial sector, which provides good-paying jobs and can prepare our city for a clean energy economy and future. The Council also secured commitments for the city to address the environmental and health impacts of last-mile facilities and trucking, including to advance a zoning reform that would require a special permit to operate the facilities, support for legislation to regulate emissions associated with their operations, and continued development of a program supporting waterborne freight as an alternative to truck traffic. Other non-zoning commitments secured by the Council include a budget commitment to hire new DOB staff positions, to launch proactive enforcement, 4 new employees, and an after-hours team for the Office of Nightlife to ensure establishments comply with laws and rules and boost in enforcement against unlicensed smoke shops. I want to thank all of the council members who have worked tirelessly on the modifications to the citywide text amendment and got it to the finish line, including council members Salamanca, Riley, Gutierrez, and Aviles. I also want to thank our entire Planning and Land Use Division, led by Paris Strotter, for your technical expertise and your dedication to this council. They have spent countless hours visiting community boards and neighborhoods, talking to our constituents and hearing their concerns, including many, many late nights and working all hours of the day. I especially want to once again thank Paris Strotter, Brian Paul, Chelsea Kelly, Ann McCoy, William Vidal, Arthur Hutt, and Andrew Lassiter, who has the nerve, who is departing the council after 5 years of service. Andrew, we thank you for all of your hard work and wish you the very best in your next chapter. Next, we'll vote on the following finance items. A preconsidered resolution sponsored by Councilmember Justin Brannan renewing a 40-year Article 5 tax exemption for the preservation of a rent-stabilized building in Councilmember Felice's district. A preconsidered resolution sponsored by Councilmember Justin Brannan renewing a 40-year Article 5 tax exemption for the preservation of 3 rent-stabilized buildings in Councilmember Salamanca's district. A preconsidered resolution sponsored by Councilmember Justin Brannan renewing a 40-year Article 5 tax exemption for the preservation of a rent-stabilized building in Councilmember Osei's district. A preconsidered resolution sponsored by Councilmember Justin Brannan authorizing a 40-year Article 11 tax exemption for the preservation of 3 rent-stabilized buildings in Councilmember Salamanca's district. Today, we are also voting on several homeroom resolutions. SLR 8, to increase the number of intersections where traffic control signal photo violation monitoring systems may be installed and operated. SLR 9, to provide WTC-related benefits to certain employees who worked at the Verrazano Bridge toll facility. SLR 10, to allow certain members of the New York City Fire Department Pension Fund to receive a membership date attributable to service in the titles of Police Cadet Program or Police Cadet Program 2 in the NYPD Cadet Program. SLR 11, eligibility for participants in the automotive 25-year age 50 pension plan with more than 30 years of credited service who remain in active service after age 62 to receive a service retirement benefit equivalent to the standard service benefit received by Tier 4 members with the same age and service. SLR 12, health coverage for surviving spouses or domestic partners of members of the FDNY employed as fire protection inspectors. SLR 13, owner liability for failure of an operator to comply with street cleaning parking rules and access to records prepared pursuant to street cleaning parking rules. SLR 14, amending the definition of overtime ceiling. Next, we will vote on the following resolutions and bills. Resolution 157, sponsored by Councilmember Julie Menon, would recognize June 6th annually as D-Day Remembrance Day in the city of New York, in honor of the courage and sacrifice of the Allied soldiers on the Normandy beaches in France. We thank our staff member, Regina Paul. Resolution 232, sponsored by Councilmember Gail Brewer, calls on the New York State Legislature to pass and the Governor to sign S. 2960, A. 5741, to provide for annual adjustment of the maximum income threshold eligibility for the Senior Citizen Rent Increase Exemption, or SCRE, Disability Rent Increase Exemption, or DRE, Senior Citizen Homeowners Exemption, or SHE, and Disabled Homeowners Exemption, DHE, programs by any increase in the Consumer Price Index. Thank you to our staff members, Anastasia Zemina and Chloe Rivera. Resolution 365, sponsored by Majority Leader Amanda Farias, calls on the New York State Legislature to pass and the Governor to sign S. 7843, A. 4888, in relation to conditional release of eligible people who are incarcerated and complete post-secondary degrees or programs. Thank you to our staff member, Natalie Meltzer. Resolution 79B, sponsored by Majority Leader Amanda Farias, would call on the New York State Legislature to pass and the Governor to sign S. 315, A. 1416, which would authorize New York City to set a 5-mile-per-hour speed limit on streets participating in the Open Streets program. Currently, the city can only recommend that drivers slow down to 5 miles per hour when operating on an open street with limited vehicular access. Thank you to our staff members, Mark Chen and Connor Mealy. This week, President Biden issued an executive order to temporarily suspend the processing of most asylum claims at the southern border. Under this order, migrants who cross without authorization, barring certain extenuating circumstances, would not be eligible for asylum. Migrants are fleeing dire humanitarian conditions in their home countries. Especially given the dangerous journeys they must undertake to reach the United States, we know that seeking asylum is often their final option for safety. There have been serious concerns raised about the impact this decision will have on the safety and well-being of families and children who are in desperate need of asylum. Resolution 340B, sponsored by Councilmember Carlina Rivera, calls on the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, to eliminate filing fees for humanitarian benefit applications and subsequent employment authorization applications. The resolution also calls on Congress and the President to move significant funding to USCIS to cover the funding lost by the eliminated filing fees. Introduction 84A, also sponsored by Councilmember Carlina Rivera, would require a designated mayoral office or city agency to develop a survey of migrants, including those who have recently arrived and those seeking asylum, to understand the skills, economic opportunities, and workforce development obstacles they face. The designated agency or office would report to the council the results of the survey and provide recommended policies and investments to support the economic well-being and success of migrants residing in New York City. Introduction 85A, also sponsored by Councilmember Rivera, would require a designated mayoral office or city agency to develop a health survey of migrants' long-term health needs, chronic conditions, and healthcare access needs. The designated agency or office would report to the council the results of the survey and provide recommendations to identify and anticipate the health needs of migrants residing in New York City. Thank you to our staff member, Nicole Kata and Rebecca Barilla. Next, we will be voting on a package of legislation to improve workplaces and promotional opportunities in the municipal workforce. In April, the council released its 2024 Pay Disparities Report, which found that persistent gender and racial wage gaps in the municipal workforce are largely the result of women of color being paid less, given their concentration in job titles that consistently provide lower wages. These bills seek to address these gender and racial wage gaps by increasing access to opportunities. Resolution 306A, sponsored by Councilmember Carmen de la Rosa, would call on the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, or DCAS, to grant additional points on promotional exams to examinees who have completed the agency's executive development and management and supervision trainings, or to examinees who have earned a degree or certificate from CUNY or similarly accredited institution. Thank you to our staff member, Elizabeth Arts. Introduction 767A, sponsored by Councilmember Crystal Hudson, would require DCAS to create a workplace culture survey to be completed by municipal employees every other year on an anonymous and voluntary basis. The survey would ask employees about their opinions on their agency's workplace culture, management practices, likelihood of departing the agency, and other equity-related concerns. This bill would require the commissioner of DCAS to submit a report on findings from the survey responses. This bill would also clarify that agencies' annual reports on their efforts to remedy pay disparities and occupational segregation should include both internal and external outreach. We thank our staff members, Rie Ogasawara and Elizabeth Arts. Introduction 809A, sponsored by Councilmember Carmen de la Rosa, would require DCAS to publish a report on its website every other year regarding DCAS's determination of promotional exam applicant eligibility. In particular, the bill would require the commissioner to report on the factors considered when making determinations to fill municipal vacancies from pools of direct line employees or to expand eligibility to collateral line employees or comparable position employees. Thank you once again to our staff members, Rie Ogasawara, Elizabeth Arts, and Nicholas Connell. And Introduction 743A, sponsored by Councilmember Carmen de la Rosa, would require municipal agencies in coordination with DCAS to offer career counseling to eligible municipal employees and advise them of career advancement, processes, and opportunities. This bill would also require agencies to conduct outreach to eligible employees regarding career counseling services and for DCAS to create written materials to provide guidance. Furthermore, this bill would require DCAS to submit a report regarding municipal employees' utilization of career counseling services and summarize the feedback the agency has received. We thank again our staffers, Rie Ogasawara and Elizabeth Arts. Finally, we will be voting on Introduction 908A, my bill, to require council advice and consent as part of the appointment process for 20 city agency commissioners, adding to those already required to undergo this step. There's been a lot of public conversation about this legislation, and I want to be clear that advice and consent is not a new concept, including for this very legislative body. Several positions have required advice and consent of the council for decades. Since the beginning of this administration in 2022, the council has approved more than 35 of its nominees for appointment without issue. Advice and consent was established by the founders of our democracy as a safeguard to protect the public interest in the appointment of top government positions from the interests of individuals. It is used in many of the nation's largest municipalities, our state governments, including our own, and the federal government. Advice and consent works, and we already have a process in place that this legislation currently builds on. Contrary to what some have claimed, this legislation does not usurp the mayor's power to appoint commissioners and top city officials, and at no point would the council be able to choose its own nominees to lead agencies. Introduction 908A adds transparency and democratic accountability by requiring a confirmation process that, again, already happens with dozens of positions. Advice and consent moves the appointment process out of the shadows, allowing greater transparency and public engagement. It's good government and can be beneficial for nominees by providing an opportunity for them to demonstrate their qualifications, hear about the range of issues they will confront, and build positive relationships with the council and the public they are serving. I'd also like to address the questions that have been raised about timing and whether this bill would slow down the process based on the schedule of a few council members or leave an agency without leadership. That's just not true. The process contains guardrails to ensure council action within 30 days of receiving an appointment. If there is a vacancy, the first deputy or a designee of the mayor would serve in an acting capacity, which once again is the current process. The city's law department currently has a highly qualified acting corporation counsel who knows the department as well as anyone. The current FDNY commissioner served as an acting commissioner until she was appointed in October of 2022. We're talking about adding 20 city agency commissioners out of more than 80 such commissioner-level positions. That's a fraction of the positions that could be subjected to advice and consent. So this is rather incremental. The reality is that the administration does not make all of its appointments at the same time or even within the same week or the same month. The council has the flexibility to work in accordance with the scheduled need for appointments, just as we have already done. Ultimately, advice and consent promotes good governance by ensuring a focus on qualifications and identifying any conflicts of interest or ethical issues on the front end to be resolved, which often happens now. It incentivizes the nomination of qualified appointees who are accountable to New Yorkers and the public interest, not political loyalty or patronage. Advice and consent is a safeguard against a Tammany Hall-like environment where commissioner positions are doled out simply because of their political allegiance to one person or another or to pursue some other interests beyond the public's, as Susan Lerner from Common Cause outlined in her testimony on this bill. We want to strengthen our city government, strengthen our representative democracy, and ensure that our city agencies are led by dedicated and highly qualified public servants to fulfill their responsibilities to every New Yorker. That is what this bill is about, and that is why we are advancing it today. We'd like to thank our staff members, David Seitzer, Jayasri Ganapathy, Eric and Erica Cohen. Thank you all for your attention, and now I turn it back over to our Majority Leader.
Thank you, Speaker Adams. I'd like us to take a moment of silence in recognition of the 80th anniversary of D-Day and those that served for us. Thank you. We will now move into the discussion of general orders, and I'd like to recognize Council members Gennaro, followed by Brewer, then Nurse.
Thank you, Madam Majority Leader. Thank you for that moment of silence about D-Day. I wish to be associated with the remarks of the Speaker on Intro 908A. She hit all the points. I perhaps have just want to give a little bit of a history on this. I go back to the council when it was under the thumb of the Board of Estimate, when the legislative leader was called the vice chair, and we've moved into a new era. And for the many years that I've been with the council, various speakers have sought to advance the influence of the body so that we could better do our jobs along excellence, which is what this does. It is human nature as a mayor to try to a lot of factors go into making appointments. Certainly, any mayor would value loyalty. A mayor would value some kind of outreach to a certain constituency. Many factors go into it, but at the end of the day, the person any person who leads an agency has to have competence, has to be able to do that. That has to be number one. And any mayor making an appointment that is going to be subject to advice and consent would certainly lead the mayor to knowing that the appointment was going to be subject to all kinds of daylight, would move the mayor to act along lines of excellence in that department. This concept goes all the way back to the Federalist Papers. I used to teach American state and local government at Queens College for many years. I entirely support this, and I would kind of be remiss if I didn't make reference to the response of the administration and high-ranking surrogates who have hurled insults and invoking Tammany Hall, talking about our work ethic, when all we're trying to do, all the speaker's trying to do, all this body is trying to do is move the council forward along lines of excellence with regard to our oversight duties. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Brewer, followed by Nurse, then Rivera.
Thank you very much. I do also want to support the speaker on 908A, advice and consent, which he said is articulately and correct as far as I'm concerned. I do want to mention that because I have some national exposure with the League of Cities, I spoke to members of the City Council in Los Angeles and in Chicago. No problems whatsoever. In Los Angeles, they do as we suggested. 99% of the nominations from the mayor are accepted, but they do, as we do, an extra effort in terms of background checks. In one situation where there was a harbor commissioner nominated, they found out that his wife was a longshorewoman in Los Angeles. They moved her to Long Beach. And in the discussions of a new fire commissioner, in Spanish, he used words that are not appropriate, and his nomination was discontinued. So it's an issue where you have extra, I would say, support for public scrutiny, and you will end up with the best. In Chicago, 51 members, just like here. The member who is nominated goes to the committee, and then to the full board. All of the nominations for commissioner are extended to this process, except Inspector General and Procurement Officer. They're contractual, but not just a percentage. Everyone is goes through the process, and it has been successful. In one case, it was delayed because it was concerned by the council on an MBWE background in terms of what somebody had done as a nominee. It was discussed with the members of the city council, and 30 days later passed. Not a problem. I want to just mention City of Yes, zoning for economic opportunity. I will vote yes for it, and I know there's a lot of work that has gone into it, but I still think there are some concerns about vacancy. I still worry that you cannot, in my opinion, no matter how many floors are in per team, put commercial over residential. I worry about that. And I also worry that we'll have enough staff to do some of the nightlife. People tend to need to have oversight.
Councilmember, your time has expired.
All right, I will just mention dark stores are not last miles. I do not want them included. Thank you very much.
I'd like to recognize Councilmember Nurse, followed by Rivera.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Good afternoon, colleagues. I just want to also express support for Intro 908A, led by Speaker Adams. As someone who really cares about good governance, for me, this bill addresses what I think is a fundamental flaw in our local government, which I think is a concentration of executive power. And despite being the largest municipality in the country, this system allows our country's largest city to be heavily governed by a single personality. And when that executive wills it, they can hamper and undermine the cooperation required for the city council to effectively deliver results for New Yorkers. I think democracy requires collaboration, and more than ever, I think we need a functioning democratic government where all branches deliberate and cooperate to solve our city's most pressing issues. And I think today's advice and consent bill will align New York City with many other localities that require consent of many public officials by its legislative branch. These are public officials who work extremely hard every day to serve our city, but they are in charge of huge sums of money. They manage thousands of staff. They are executing our city's laws, and these responsibilities are quite enormous and affect the lives of millions. And I think it's therefore more than reasonable for New York City to join other municipalities in requiring greater democratic input on mayoral appointees. So I think advice and consent will advance better public officials, but also limit the common threads of fraud, corruption, and political favoritism that have plagued our city for generations. So I will proudly be voting for this legislation, which I know will make this city and government more effective. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Councilmember Rivera, followed by Caban.
Thank you so much, Madam Majority Leader. And I also want to express my support for Intro 908. I thought the Speaker summed up our position as a body very eloquently, and it is time. I would also like to speak briefly on 3 of my proposals before the Council today and ask for everyone's support. I want to thank Speaker Adams and Chair Aviles for their support. Groups like Aid for Life and the New York Immigration Coalition for their partnership in crafting these bills, and to colleagues and organizations who have submitted testimony in support. We're in an era of global displacement, and the number of individuals and families seeking asylum in the United States has risen significantly in recent years, and we are seeing that firsthand here in New York City. With more than 65,000 individuals seeking asylum currently in the care of the city, elected leadership must be more proactive in providing opportunities for people to transition out of the shelter system and into more permanent living situations. Today, I request support on Intros 84 and 85 that will lay the groundwork for a more effective humanitarian response going forward. And speaking with community organizers, I've learned that we must accumulate data to understand how the city has supported work permit applications, entrepreneurship, workforce development initiatives, and access to healthcare in order to identify the gaps in our efforts. And these bills would require that the administration conduct workforce and healthcare-related surveys for asylum seekers. And additionally, I request support for Resolution 340, calling on the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the USCIS, to eliminate filing fees for humanitarian benefit applications and subsequent employment authorization applications. It is so important that we remove financial barriers that could force individuals to enter an underground economy that increases their risk of labor exploitation or harm. Our immigrant communities are an important part of our city's legacy, and these bills are a thoughtful investment in a better future for all families. Thank you to the staff for helping to make this happen, and to all the advocates for their assistance and support.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Councilmember Caban, followed by Aviles.
Thank you. I also want to express my support and urge my colleagues to support Intro 908, and thank you to the Speaker for her leadership. You know, it was already said by the good governance guru of this body, Councilmember Gennaro, that this is just a simple expanding of the democratization of our body. As was mentioned by Councilmember Brewer, a different national organization, but as a member of Local Progress, a membership organization of progressive municipal electeds across the country, I too reached out to colleagues in different cities, and it's very clear that New York City is a bit of an outlier in terms of just how executive heavy the powers lie in our municipal and state governments, but obviously we're talking municipal here. And, you know, this is important for the reasons that my colleague said. It isn't about one mayor. It isn't about a current mayor. It is about good government today, tomorrow, and for decades in the future, although I will say that this particular mayor gives us the best example of why advice and consent is so important, because we've seen a series and a pattern of patronage of folks that don't necessarily have the kind of experience that not just we would like to see, but our constituents are demanding to see in a lot of these positions. So really proud to support, and I hope my colleagues will too. Thank you.
Councilmember Aviles.
Thank you so much. I would like to also express my support as a believer in democracy and making all points of decision-making undertaken by any level of government to be transparent and accessible to the people. I strongly support Intro 908 and this effort of the council to both advise and consent on the mayoral appointees for the roles outlined. This strengthens our democracy and our government. I also want to express my support for the group of bills put forward by Councilmember Rivera. We know as policymakers that it is impossible to make good policy and conduct oversight without data. And as such, knowing the needs of New York City residents will just help policymakers and elected officials tailor the city's programming and make more effective service delivery. So I encourage my colleagues to support and thank Councilmember Rivera for her legislation.
Thank you, council members. Seeing no one else signed up to speak. Report of special committees.
None.
Reports of standing committees.
Report of the Committee on Civil Service and Labor, intros 743A and 767A, career counseling and workplace culture surveys.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Intro 809A, promotion examinations.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Finance, preconsidered LU 86 and Reso 459 through preconsidered LU 89 and Reso 462, tax exemptions.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Governmental Operations, State and Federal Legislation, Intro 908A, Council Advice and Consent.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Immigration, Intros 84A and 85A, Workforce and Health Surveys of Immigrants.
Amended and coupled on general orders. I now ask that the clerk take a roll call vote on all of the items coupled on today's general orders calendar.
Abreu.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
Yo también les quiero prestar el apoyo a esta ley del Intro 908. El asesoramiento y el consentimiento garantizan que los comisionados del alcalde sean responsables ante los intereses de toda la ciudad, no solo del alcalde o de intereses especiales. El asesoramiento y consentimiento son esenciales para que funcione un sistema de control y equilibrio. Esto sería una salvaguardia de gobierno democrático establecido por los fundadores de nuestro país para proteger el interés público. Esta ley no impide la capacidad del alcalde para designar a los comisionados. Sin embargo, simplemente sacan el proceso de las sombras, lo que permite una mayor transparencia, conciencia pública y participación. En ningún momento el Consejo podrá elegir a su propio candidato para dirigir una agencia de la ciudad. Ese poder sigue estando únicamente en manos del alcalde. El alcalde debería aprovechar la oportunidad de celebrar y presentar a sus comisionados al público. Muchísimas gracias y espero que todos mis colegas apoyen esta legislación. Thank you. I vote aye.
Thank you, Councilman. Ariola.
Aye on all except for land use items 55 and 56, which I am an absolute no.
Aviles.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
So for real this time, colleagues, we're voting on the City of Yes for economic opportunity, and after significant back and forth between the council and DCP, I am pleased to vote yes today in honor of the gains made for the communities I represent. For many years, we have struggled to get this administration to hear the cries of my community as we choke on more and more last-mile facilities. Our community members, our environmental justice advocates, have been at this so much longer, recognizing the rapid proliferation of these facilities during the pandemic as e-commerce swelled to unprecedented levels. So with the support of 29 of our colleagues here today, we sent a letter to DCP demanding action on last mile. And we are pleased to have a written commitment from the administration to develop tools to both address traffic and pollution caused by these facilities. But most important, we also have a commitment to implement a special permit for these facilities that have particular impact in Black and brown working class neighborhoods like the ones I represent. This is a long overdue victory for our communities, and it wouldn't have been possible without the tireless advocacy of our District 38 residents, environmental justice advocates, including NEJA, Earth Justice, El Puente, Uprose, and Red Hook Initiative, Newtown Creek Alliance, and El Puente. These gains, the points. These gains could not have been made without the support of my colleagues. I thank you all, including Councilmember Salamanca, Councilmember Riley, and Speaker Adams. A special shout out to the land use team who has lent us their expertise and has engaged with us in every step through this process. And lastly, I must also thank Councilmember Gutierrez and her team for their leadership on the critical negotiations regarding industrial manufacturing zones. Thank you. I vote aye.
Thank you, Councilmember. Ayala.
I vote aye.
Banks.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
When I was sent to this body by the residents of the 42nd Councilmanic District, it was with the commitment to amplify their voices and express their concerns and fight for their interests. As a lifelong resident of East New York, the East New York community, one of which development efforts have still left most undeserved residents behind, I am keenly aware of the need for the changes to the many outdated zoning laws. But for the past 5+ months, myself and members of my staff have sat through numerous briefings with the Department of City Planning, land use, staff at the council, and have attended numerous community-focused meetings where we've watched many of the proposals from City of Yes text amendments evolve as more and more feedback has been received. I've listened intensely to the feedback from the constituents and have also read dozens of the emails related to the City of Yes text amendment. And one thing is clear, while changes to our zoning laws are overdue, they must be changed in a responsible manner. Feedback from the multitude of sources described previously has suggested that this process is being rushed, that the information is convoluted and often presented using language and terms not always easily digested by laypersons. Today, based on the feedback I've received from many of my district stakeholders, I remain concerned that this plan, while being improved with each layer of new input, is not ready for passage and is not in the best interest of the 42nd Council District. I believe that this plan will lead to several issues, including disruption of long-standing communities in the 42nd Council District. I've listened carefully to the sentiments from the 4 community boards that I represent, and they have weighed in and stated that this is not what they want. Therefore, in the interest of those constituents of the 42nd Council District who put their trust in me to represent
Councilmember, your time has
interests,
expired.
I will vote no on the text amendment number 2, zoning opportunity, economic opportunity. Thank you. Aye on all except that text amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Botcher.
Aye on all.
Brennan.
Aye.
Brewer.
Aye.
Brooks Powers.
I vote aye.
Caban.
Aye on all.
Carr.
Vote no on LUs 55 and 56 with accompanying resolutions 463 and 464, and aye on the rest.
De La Rosa.
Aye on all.
Dinowitz.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
Thank you. I just want to speak in high support of Introduction 908. I think it's so critical that we ensure that our individual constituents have a voice in the direction of the city. And it often feels as though when one single executive, one mayor has all of the power, and we often feel voiceless and powerless, and that's a result of our constituents feeling voiceless and powerless. And the Speaker's bill
ensures that to some degree our constituents and we in this body get a greater voice and a greater say in the direction of this city. So I'm proudly voting aye on 908, aye on all except for land use 55, 56, and accompanying resolutions 463 and 464.
Feliz.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
I vote aye on all, and as chair of the Small Business Committee, I'm especially proud to vote yes on the City of Yes for economic opportunity. When rules make it hard for a business to thrive, our communities are hurt the most. Our communities lose out on opportunities related to jobs and economic activity in our neighborhoods. Small businesses are facing many challenges, and there are many rules that are only frustrating their ability to grow and thrive. Rules related to, for example, when and how they can use the space, or where they can locate, and so much more. For example, rules allowing you to have a bar and music at late hours, but people cannot get up and dance. Just imagine that small business trying to compete with the other restaurants who actually do allow people to get up and dance. Think about all the customers that that small restaurant is losing out on. Small business owners work hard and they're creative, and we need to make sure that our rules help them grow and thrive. So I vote aye on all. Also want to associate myself with every point mentioned by our speaker, Speaker Adrian Adams, on the advice and consent bill. Good government is government that is transparent and accountable. Thank you. I vote aye on all.
Gennaro.
Aye.
Gutierrez.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
Thank you. For the last 10 years, I've been fighting to protect our manufacturing zones, not just because my district is home to the third largest IBZ, but because I understand the transformative nature of these jobs and this importance of the supply chain. While New York City was once a thriving manufacturing hub, the industry has faced a steep decline, mirroring national trends. But New York City is not like any other city. And so I'm so proud of our speaker and our council land use team who supported our M-Zone coalition to finally address and codify protections for manufacturing zones. 14 months of collaborative efforts culminated in a strong and united front to prioritize real manufacturing, fostering economic growth, especially in areas with access to waterways and railways. I once again want to thank the speaker for her unwavering support, the M-Zone Coalition, Majority Leader Amanda Farias for working together to pass the Industrial Development Strategic Plan last year, specifically Brian Paul from Land Use, along with the rest of the team and all members of the M-Zone Coalition, and of course to all the advocates at ANHD's Industrial Jobs Coalition who have been working on this for literally decades. And I'm so glad that we were able to work together with DCP to make necessary amendments. I also just want to shout out Anya Lair from my team who did significant organizing in the M-Zone Coalition, along with all the colleagues who joined the coalition. I vote aye. Thank you.
Hanif.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
I vote aye on all, and I am particularly proud to vote aye on the speaker's bill, Intro 908, and commend her and Government Operations Chair Ressler for their continued leadership on the basic good government issue. An effective democracy requires a system of checks and balances on the branches of government, and expanded advice and consent authority is an important step in the right direction. Additionally, I'm excited to vote aye on the Zoning for Economic Opportunity text amendment, which features significant M-zone changes and a commitment to regulate last-mile facilities. The amendments that the council secured provide an opportunity for industrial businesses to grow and create quality job opportunities. I commend the hard work that went into the final language before us. And I also want to recognize my foster youth, Lanisha, who showed up today and has been with my team, and just excited to welcome all of the young people to our chambers.
Councilmember?
I vote aye on all.
Thank you. Hanks.
I vote aye on all with the exception of Land Use 55 and 56 and accompanying resolutions 463, 464, and Intro 908A. Thank you.
Holden.
Aye on all except for LUs 55 and 56 and accompanying resolutions, of which I vote no.
Hudson.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
Thank you. I'm proud to vote in favor of Intro 908,
which would require the advice and consent of this body as part of the appointment process for 20 city agency commissioners, long after those sitting in this chambers today are gone. The City Council already maintains this power, and any argument that claims it is an overreach clearly does not know this body. LA does this, Chicago does this, Albany does this, and Congress does this. Why then shouldn't the largest city in the U.S.? I'd also like to point out that the zoning text amendments for the City of Yes for Economic Opportunity is a perfect example of the two branches of city government working together, which this body always strives to do. We're passing amendments to the original proposal after careful consideration from community boards across the city, and with that, I'm aye on all. Thank you.
Joseph.
Aye on all, and like to shout out my Forster youth for the day, Nia.
Krishnan.
Aye on all.
Lee.
Aye on all, with the exception of LU 55 and 56 and accompanying resos 463 and 464, for which I am a no.
Lewis.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
Thank you. I want to thank Speaker Adams, my colleagues, as well as the Planning and Land Use Division for diligent efforts to work on modifications to address concerns regarding the City of Yes proposals. I am particularly proud to have supported measures that curtail proposals which would have placed commercial uses in conflict with homeowners and tenants alike. However, the feedback I've received from my constituents indicates that these modifications, while a step in the right direction, do not go far enough. My concerns remain centered on the potential for increased conflicts between residential and commercial spaces, particularly in areas in my district where noise complaints and other undesirable uses are already a constant battle. In addition, we still lack a firm commitment from the administration to retroactively resolve some of these issues that may be impacted by some of these text amendment proposals. Therefore, I vote aye on all except LUs 55, 56, and the accompanying resolutions. Thank you.
Mamarato.
I vote aye on all, with the exception of LU 55 and 56 and the accompanying resolutions, which I am a no.
Marte.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
Zoning is one of the most powerful tools to ensure what gets built in this city is for our communities and not at the expense of them. This principle informed my critique of the City of Yes for Economic Opportunity. How we modernize our zoning code and what we incentivize in our commercial spaces should answer the decade-long commercial vacancy crisis and work towards a more livable and affordable city. Thankfully, we've worked in the City Council to make some essential modifications to the mayor's proposal to strengthen protection for quality of life for residents that live in commercial areas and help our small businesses thrive. One of the most critical changes we advocated for was ensuring that new businesses that want to open up in NYCHA campuses serve the community needs instead of targeting them. We also made sure that tenants who live in mixed commercial and residential buildings are protected from displacement by stopping residential to commercial conversions. We distinguish between your neighborhood bar that might have a karaoke night and a 300-person music venue. We expanded noise and air quality requirements to more businesses who work out of these mixed-use buildings. We've reined in production uses so your neighborhood storefronts can continue to provide goods and services you might actually want on your block. We advocated for these changes to protect our communities because they were only accepted because our community spoke up for themselves. I want to thank the community boards, advocate activists, small business groups, resident associations, and everyone who faced this text amendment head-on, all 1,100 pages of it, and who spoke up for the future of their community. I'm happy to see the progress we made over the past 6 months, and as we move forward to the housing opportunity, I look forward to seeing the same passion from my constituents as we've seen thus far. I will make sure that you are heard loud and clear. And finally, I want to thank Council Land Use, Brian, William Vidal, Paris, and the whole team that made this possible. Thank you. And I vote aye on all.
Thank you. Mealy.
May I explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Yes, I want to concur with my colleague Chris Banks with the 41st District. I had probably the most Community Advisory Board meetings on this text amendment, And the last one I did have just 2 weeks ago, they said this city is not a city of yes, it's a city of mess. And I just want to vote no on LU 55 and Reso 463 and LU 56 and Reso 464. And I want to give great kudos to our speaker in regards to making sure that everyone is held accountable, that we do start putting people in positions that really have the passion and the energy and the expertise for these positions. So I vote aye on everything else. Thank you.
Menon.
Aye on all.
Moya.
I vote aye.
Thank you. Narcisse.
Permission to explain my vote, Madam?
Permission granted.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, thank you for all the work you have done toward making sure that we address the inequities in New York City. So I have to say thank you to Paris for coming over and over again trying to explain the city of yes to my constituents. But as we go through all this process, I appreciate the goals behind these plans. My constituents have clearly opposed them. The one-size-fits-all approach does not address the unique needs of the 46th district. Economic development is vital, but a blanket strategy may harm the various people that it aims to help. And that's the statement for many folks from my community. So, and hard, I understand that we have not had the city plan address since 1960. It is a must, but at this point that we cannot, my community saying a total no, and we cannot go forward with a hard break that we need to revise it and we need to do more. On that other note, I am thrilled to have Faithful Bradford with me today for Shadowing Day. It's a great opportunity for young people to be exposed and to make sure they understand the operation, and she was inspiring me and looks forward to remain connected and helping her to achieve all the goals. So on that note, for the Ms. Swan, I want to say thank you for this amazing bill that you're putting in the forefront. Squatting being a big problem in our community, and I'm looking forward to have a solution. And on that note, I vote yes to all others except, I will say, LU 55 and accompanying Reso 463 and LU 56 accompanying Reso 464. And thank you, Madam.
Nurse.
I vote aye on all except LU 55 and Reso 463.
Osei.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Briefly, I just want to applaud the leadership from the speaker for both Intro 908. We're not reinventing the wheel here. I think many of the speakers before highlighted that we're replicating what other municipalities do in this country and increasing transparency when it comes to people who lead our city. And then also for the work that the Speaker's office and the Speaker herself has done for the amendments on City of Yes for economic opportunity. You know, my community boards were not happy with how it was laid out at first. It's a lot of dense information, and I really do want to thank Council Land Use and the Speaker for all of the work that they've put into these amendments and making my community feel okay with City of Yes for economic opportunity. So I vote aye on all, and I want to thank the Speaker and this Council for moving forward on both of these issues.
Thank you. Palladino.
I vote no on 908A. I vote no on land use 55 and 56. District 19 has expressed through their two community boards, no matter what we said, no matter what city planning did do, and I thank them for coming to District 19 as they have, and great deal of patience and understanding and taking questions. Kudos to you guys, but I must say that on behalf of my district, it's an absolute solid no. So thank you very much. Aye on all the rest.
Powers.
Thank you. I'm voting aye today, and I just want to take a second to send a thank you to our land use division, who I know have worked diligently on the City of Yes proposal to help address the concerns and comments from many of the colleagues in here. I also wanted to give a particular shout out to Jeff Campagna for his early efforts with me last term to take a last step here to repeal the cabaret law through our zoning in New York City, which we are finally taking a vote on today, and looks like it will be repealed. So I'm very grateful for his assistance and work last term on that. And I also wanted to give a thank you to the city planning team and Chair Garodnick for taking time to address questions, presenting to committee boards, I think every committee board throughout the city, and working also with council members on this proposal to make sure it got right. But to echo what Councilmember Felice said, this is a really boost for all small businesses here in New York City who are getting regulations that make way more sense. It's helping to modernize us to stay competitive in the global economy and to frankly fills vacant storefronts as well. And I think will be a really important measure here to continue to modernize New York City, and I'm proud to vote aye.
Wrestler.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Majority Leader. I just want to thank the Speaker for her leadership, and this is a historic, a bold, a courageous bill that will ensure that we have real checks and balances that generate more experienced, more competent, more ethical leaders serving in critically important positions in city government, like parks, like sanitation, or as was notable this week, DCAS. We need this oversight in place. What this bill does is it ensures the council vets each and every one of these commissioners. It ensures a public hearing where we ask tough questions and the commissioners demonstrate that they are up to the job. And then there's a vote. And this all happens in 30 days. It's quick. When we held our hearing just a week or so ago, we heard from people testifying worrying that it was too fast, that we wouldn't have the time to conduct the necessary rigorous oversight. But we have to move fast because that's what New Yorkers expect, and that's why this legislation, I think, strikes the right balance. I was genuinely shocked that the administration would have the chutzpah to show up at a hearing and refuse to answer questions. I cannot remember any mayoral administration ever coming to a council hearing and refusing to engage us, in refusing to answer the questions of this body and the people that sent us here. We must not only pass this bill, but override a veto that we know is coming, because this bill will better ensure that we get the best and the brightest serving in New York City government. We deserve more ethical leadership. This bill will help make it happen. Aye on all.
Riley.
Aye.
Rivera.
I vote aye.
Salam.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
Thank you. Although I'm new to the council, the appointment process seems strange to me, but now we're fixing that. This council got swagger. I want to thank the Speaker Adams for her leadership and direction. Today we stand at a pivotal moment in our city's history. As we consider the passage of Intro 908, this legislation is not just a procedural change, it is a significant step towards good governance. For too long, the unchecked power of the mayor to appoint individuals to high positions has created a fundamental flaw in our local government. This bill addresses that flaw by ensuring a more democratic and transparent process. By requiring advice and consent from the City Council, we are ending an era of political favoritism. Appointments should not be based on personal connections or political loyalty, but on merit and the best interests of our citizens. This legislation guarantees that appointees are vetted thoroughly, ensuring that they are qualified and capable of serving our diverse city. In closing, supporting this bill is a vote for a more transparent, more equitable, and more effective government. It is a vote to enhance public trust and to ensure that our city is led by individuals who truly represent the values and needs of all New Yorkers. Let us embrace this opportunity to fortify our democracy and to build a stronger, fairer New York City. Thank you, and I vote aye on all.
Salamanca.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you. With our city's commercial zoning regulations having gone unchanged since 1961, hindering economic success, the City Council's approval of City of Yes for Economic Opportunity proposal provides the opportunity to strike the right balance in promoting such desperately needed economic growth. As chair of the Committee on Land Use, I'm proud to have worked with Speaker Adams, Jeremy John, Parrish, and the Land Use team, and my colleagues, Councilmember Avilés and Gutierrez, and the best delegation in the Council, the Bronx delegation, to have negotiated a commitment for a special permit to address the issue of last-mile facility operations and protections for our communities against micro-distribution sites in residential areas. While it is important to protect our business communities, we cannot overlook the historic environmental justice issues that have plagued districts like mine in the South Bronx with high pollution and asthma rates for far too long. And with that, I vote aye on all. Thank you.
Sanchez.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you. I just want to join in thanking the speaker for your leadership and your vision in stewarding Intro 908. By expanding advice and consent, we are empowering the public as well. As public deliberations amplified by the media taking place at the City Council will provide all the opportunity for input on these very important decisions. Because sunlight is the best disinfectant, I vote aye on Intro 908 and aye on all. Thank you.
Schulman.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
First, I want to acknowledge the foster youth who is shadowing me today, Marcus Diego. These youth are our future, and they're really amazing, and I'm looking forward to working with them moving forward. I also want to say I want to thank the speaker and the land use staff, particularly Paris and everybody else, for working with my community on the zoning for economic opportunity text amendment. There were some significant issues in my particular district, and by the way, listening to all the comments today, you can see that every district is different. So the significant issues that affected my district were pretty much resolved. And so with that, I vote aye on all. Thank you.
Stevens.
Aye on all.
Ung.
Aye on all.
Vernikov. Williams.
I vote aye on all.
Juan.
Aye on all, and thank you to Speaker Adams for her fierce leadership on advice and consent.
Yeager.
May I be excused to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you. Heard a lot today about the comparison between this body and the system of government founded by the forefathers of this nation. And I don't know that there's anybody in New York City who believes that we are, in this body, apt of that comparison by any means. This bill, we talk about being a deliberative body, was introduced 15 days ago, 15 days from introduction to passage. It's not a secret why we're seeing this now. There's a lot of talk that it's not about a personalities conflict between this side of the building and the other, but it clearly is. And I think we've seen that, and I think we've seen how that plays out in public. When the question of adding the Office of the Corporation Counsel to the Charter as an advise and consent position was deliberated on, it was deliberated by a Charter Revision Commission 5 years ago over far more than 15 days. A substantial amount of time, better part of a year, and then put before the voters. What we're doing today is a bill that we're passing that has not been deliberated on at all, from introduction to passage 15 days, and will never be put before the voters because the charter provides for it to be knocked off the ballot by a mayoral charter commission, which has been appointed. So that is all to say that this is all a show. It's not real. We're passing a bill today that's never going to see the light of day. And don't really want to vote for something like that. So I'm going to vote no on Introduction 908. And for the reasons stated by so many in this chamber today, from all neighborhoods in this city, I'm voting no on LU 55, 56, Resolutions 463 and 464, and aye on all the rest. Thank you very much.
Zhuang.
I accept land use 55 and 56 with resolution.
Thank you. Vernikov. Borelli.
I and all accept intro 908A and land use 55 and 56 and the accompanying resolutions.
Farias.
I vote aye on all, and I'd like to express my support for my vote today on City of Yes zoning for economic opportunity. This council has met not only our citywide needs, but my community's concerns and needs. And I want to thank my colleagues, specifically Speaker Adrian Adams, Councilmember Gutierrez, and all the work we've done with our coalition, the land use team, and particularly my Community Board 9 in the community who voted unanimously for this proposal, along with sent over a bunch of conditions, continued to work with our land use team to make sure those conditions were met by modifications. And additionally, I'd like to express my support for Intro 908 and would like to associate myself with the remarks from my colleague from Brooklyn in District 35.
Speaker Adams.
I will be voting aye on all, and I particularly want to thank the overwhelming majority of my colleagues for having the foresight to support Introduction 908, because truthfully, colleagues, when you cut through the noise, the truth is that advice and consent is a common feature, which most of you realize. It's a common feature of representative democracy in cities and states across this country, including New York. And New York City, where we live, is an outlier. So our vote today to pass this legislation supports the council's efforts to advance transparency, and it's a first step in this important conversation about representative democracy that's accountable to its people. And the final decision ultimately must be made by voters. Colleagues, I thank you for having the foresight, and the foresight to see beyond yourselves and see beyond just this council in this space, but to look forward to seeing future councils to maintain the stability and maintain the integrity of this great institution. Thank you, colleagues. I vote aye.
All items on today's general order calendar are adopted by a vote of 50 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and 0 abstentions, with the exception of Intro 908A, which was adopted by a vote of 46 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative, and 0 abstentions. And land use item 55 and accompanying resolution 463, which was adopted by a vote of 34 in the affirmative, 16 in the negative, and 0 abstentions. And land use item 56 and accompanying resolution 464, which was adopted by a vote of 35 in the affirmative, 15 in the negative, and 0 abstentions. Introduction and reading of bills. Speaker Adams.
All bills have been referred to committees as indicated on today's agenda.
Thank you. We will now move into discussion of resolutions. And I'd like to recognize Councilmember Menon.
Thank you very much, Majority Leader. I'm honored to speak on my resolution, Resolution 157, that marks today, June 6, as D-Day Remembrance Day. I can't think of a more fitting way to remember this anniversary than voting on this resolution today. 80 years ago, the D-Day operation of June 6, 1944, brought together the land, air, and sea forces of the Allied armies in what became known as the largest amphibious invasion in military history. This successful operation ultimately led to the end of World War II and the liberation of Europe from Nazi Germany. As former President Barack Obama said in 2014, victory on D-Day dealt a significant blow to an ideology fueled by hatred. I honestly can't think of a better way to honor the legacy, courage, and sacrifice of our armed forces than having June 6 annually recognized as D-Day Remembrance Day in the city of New York. I urge my colleagues to join me in adopting this resolution, and I thank Regina Paul for drafting this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Seeing no one else signs up for discussion, we will now have a voice vote on today's resolutions. If you wish to vote against or abstain from any of today's resolutions, please notify the Legislative Documents Unit by email or by approaching the dais. I'll now read today's resolutions into the record. Resolution 79B calls on the New York State Legislature to pass and the governor to sign Senate Bill 315, and Assembly Bill number 1416, which would authorize New York City to set a 5-mile-per-hour speed limit on streets participating in the Open Streets program. Will all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Resolution 157 recognizes June 6th annually as D-Day Remembrance Day in the city of New York in honor of the courage and sacrifice of the Allied soldiers on the Normandy beaches in France. Will all those in favor say aye? All opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Resolution 232 calls on the New York State Legislature to pass and the governor to sign Senate Bill number 2960 and Assembly Bill number 5741 to provide for annual adjustment of the maximum income threshold eligibility of the senior citizen rent increase exemption, the disability rent increase exemption, and the senior citizen homeowners exemption, and the disabled homeowners exemption by any increase in the consumer price index. Will all those in favor say aye? All opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Resolution 306B calls on the Department of Citywide Administrative Services to grant additional points on the promotional exams to examinees who have completed the agency's executive development and management supervision trainings, or to examinees who have earned a degree or a certificate from the City University of New York or a similarly accredited institution. Will all those in favor say aye? All opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Resolution 340B calls on the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, also known as USCIS, to eliminate filing fees for humanitarian benefit applications and subsequent employment authorization applications, and calls on Congress and the President to move significant funding to USCIS to cover the funding lost by the eliminating filing fees. Will all those in favor say aye? All opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Lastly, Resolution 365 calls on the New York State Legislature to pass and the governor to sign Senate Bill number 7843 and Assembly Bill number 4888 in relation to conditional release for eligible offenders who complete post-secondary degrees or programs. Will all those in favor say aye? All opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. We will now move into general discussion. I'd like to recognize Councilmember Zhuang, followed by Riley, then Stevens. Councilmember Zhuang has stepped away. Moving on to Councilmember Riley.
Thank you, Majority Leader. I am proud to introduce two pieces of legislation today, one vital to sustaining our city's housing market for homeowners and lawful tenants, and the second vital to monitoring and reporting on after-school programs in New York City. Alongside Councilmember Zhuang, we are introducing legislation that provides advocacy to address citywide issues affecting homeowners. Reso 458 calls on the New York State Legislation to pass New York Senate Bill 8995, proposed by Senator Spanton, which would exclude squatters from tenant protections, extend the period for tenancy rights from 30 days to 60 days of possession, and add squatting to the definition of criminal trespass in the third degree. With support from our colleagues, this legislation is pivotal steps toward clarifying New York State squatting laws and fortifying housing stability for more New Yorkers. Equally important, we must turn our attention to enhancing our network of support, development, and essential services for our students that extend beyond their academic learning with their school curriculum. After-school programming is crucial for our students, especially those in underserved communities, as it provides expanded academic support, enrichment activities, and a safe environment, helping to bridge the opportunity gap and promote overall well-being and success. My bill, Intro 955, which I co-sponsor with Councilmember Hanks, will require the DOE and DYCD to provide the publicly post annual reports on after-school programs, including location, available seats, enrollment, student demographic data, and attendance for each after-school program offered in the previous school year. I hope my colleagues could support me in this effort, and I just want to shout out my foster youth child that is with me today, and she's with her baby. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I want to remind everyone in the chamber that business is still being conducted and we need silence. I'd like to call on Councilmember Stevens, followed by Brewer.
Today we celebrate our annual Foster Youth Shadow Day at City Hall, a day where young people have the opportunity to witness how City Council operates and learn more about their local government offices. I would like to say thanks to the Foster Youth Alliance, who played a big part to ensure that our young people are civically engaged. My heart is always full with joy every time young people join us down at City Hall. It gives up for all the young people, let's give it up for all the young people in the room today and for joining us, because it's so amazing. Those applause were not big enough, so let's do that again. Let's give it up for the young people in the room today. Thank you. Y'all know I don't play about my young people. So all the young people in this room today, I encourage you to come back, because often we come down to City Hall and we pass a budget, we pass legislation and create initiatives to support young people. But I always encourage you to be a part of this process, because I know that how important it is for us to hear and listen to you. I want you to know that you belong in spaces where decisions are being made. You deserve to be in every room where conversations about your future is taking place. Your perspective is essential, and your participation in local government is critical. I want to give a special shout out to my foster care shadow person, who was narrator, who was amazing, and who does not want to be a council member, but wants to be a chief of staff, because she knows where the real work is happening. So shout out to her. And a special shout out to China, who was my colleague's young person today, who came in with a list of legislation and ideas that she is going to make sure I push forward, me and my colleagues push forward, because she came in ready and part of the conversation. I also want to say, right after stated, BLAC and myself will be hosting a conversation with the young people. So please come to the committee room and have a conversation and say hello to the young people. Thank you.
I'd like to recognize Council Member Brewer, followed by Aviles.
Thank you very much. I want to also say a shout out to young people, and I certainly want to thank Sean, who's here. Sean, stand up, stand up. He's here, foster care BMCC student, and also part of ASAP, which is my favorite program at CUNY. Thank you very much, Sean, for being here today. I also want to congratulate Alfredo Avila, who is an intern this summer. He is a recent graduate of John Jay High School, and he's heading to Cornell University in the fall. Alfredo, please stand up. And Kenan Freed, who is a rising junior at the University of Rochester. And I hope as time goes on, I was the one that initiated the bill to get young people 16 years old on community boards. I hope everybody nominates people to be 16, who are 16, to be on community boards. And I would like to see, as time goes on, it has to go to the state also, 16-year-olds be able to vote in municipal elections. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Aviles, followed by Mealy.
Thank you, Majority Leader. So a shout out to Councilmember Stevens and her organizing of today's Shadow Day, and also a special shout out to my shadow person, Maria, who is doing great work, and so happy to have her with us today. I'd like to today we're introducing another bill aimed at increasing transparency from the EDC. Intro 937 builds on the work we've been doing in conjunction with the community of Red Hook over the past year since the announcement of the massive cruise liner operation in our small community, overburdened with traffic and pollution, and calls on the EDC to publish the data related to shore power plug-in, which as of this summer is mandated if a cruise ship did not plug in, why didn't it plug in? This data will give us critical information about the state of our infrastructure or just plain old noncompliance. I urge you all to sign on to this as we look forward to meeting the targets set forth in the CLCPA. Thank you so much, colleagues.
Thank you. Seeing no other members signed up to speak that are in. Recognizing Councilmember Brooks Powers.
Thank you. I'm proud to introduce a bill today that will make life easier for drivers and riders of commuter vans in New York City. Introduction 939. Outer borough residents rely on commuter vans to plug critical gaps in transit desert communities. Our commuter vans and their drivers have long provided reliable, affordable options to communities like Southeast Queens, which lack access to the city's core transit network. Last year, this body passed a resolution to support legislation that would allow commuter vans to accept hails from prospective passengers on the street, a practice which is currently banned. I am pleased to now introduce this legislation within the council to allow street hails for commuter vans. This will not only protect drivers, but also ensure easier access for riders. For too long, outer borough communities of color and low-income communities have not received their fair share of the city's investment and attention in transportation. This bill will play a small role in helping outer borough residents get better access to critical transportation. I look forward to continuing to work in the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure and with my colleagues to address these key concerns for transit desert communities. And I urge my colleagues to support this bill. Thank you.
I'll now call on Speaker Adrian Adams to close today's stated meeting.
Thank you very much, Madam Majority Leader. The stated meeting of June 6, 2024 is hereby adjourned.